Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Capital Carnage. I am Ken Carnage, and it is time to continue our discussion of the Constitution, more accurately, the Bill of Rights of the Constitution. My first video was on the First Amendment. As this is my second video, I'll give you three guesses as to which amendment we're going to cover this time. That's right, the Second Amendment. So, the Second Amendment says, and I quote, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It's nowhere as near as long as the First Amendment, but somehow it is just as important. So let's break it down like we did with the first one, shall we? A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. Some people have incorrectly theorized that that statement means that you're only supposed to be able to have guns if you're part of a militia. That's not accurate. First off, talk about what is a militia in the first place. Militia is essentially a group of fighters. It's a group of citizens that come together to be a group of fighters. A militia is not necessarily trained soldiers, as it is almost a citizen regiment, almost in case of emergency type deal. Something we haven't had to see in this country very much at all in the last century, almost and a half. We haven't had a war fought on our soil. We haven't had to bring together a militia. But it doesn't change the fact that we can and should be prepared to in case of certain circumstances. So no, you do not have to have an active militia in order for the Second Amendment to protect your right to bear arms. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's pretty black and white right there. Shall not be infringed says it all. And to tell the truth, the majority of government entities in this country have already violated this amendment. Shall not be infringed. They treat our right to protect ourselves, our right to defend our homes and families, and they turn it in and they treat it like a privilege. It's not a privilege; it's a right. Okay. For instance, in the state that I live in, the process to even own a firearm is somewhat extensive. I'm sure there are places where it might be worse, looking at you, California, but still, it's an extensive process, and it's an expensive process. You're talking hundreds of dollars just for the state to say, okay, we trust you a little, you know? And then on top of that, it's not like the weapons are cheap either. And they keep hiking up the taxes on ammunition. So they are trying to, so it would seem, just on the outside looking in, what it looks like to me is that they're trying to make this more and more expensive so that more and more normal Americans can't afford to do it. Let me ask you this. What reason could you possibly think a government would want to disarm its citizens for? Well, let's talk about a little history. What countries have disarmed their citizens in the past? Germany famously disarmed its citizens before the start of World War II. Russia under Joseph Stalin disarmed its citizens. China under Mao disarmed its citizens. Cuba, I believe, disarmed their citizens. I might have to check that one. I'm pretty sure. And then, of course, you have Venezuela that disarmed their citizens. Okay. Everything that followed, all the atrocities that have followed under these Pol Pot, he also, all of the atrocities that followed after this, the millions, the thousands, hundreds of thousands dead, might have even been millions under Hitler, the millions dead under Stalin, the millions dead under Mao. I think those numbers might have been a little smaller if the people's right to defend themselves hadn't been taken away. I'm not saying there wouldn't have been tragedy. I'm not saying there wouldn't have been people who died. But the people would have had a fighting chance. And that's the other thing. You know, though the Second Amendment, at the time the Second Amendment was written, the American people had access to the same weaponry that our army used. You know, it was muskets, muzzle loaders, flintlock pistols. If a regular citizen wanted to buy a cannon, I mean, they could, but they would have to have the money to afford it, you know, because a cannon was an expensive thing. My point is there was no restriction saying, hey, I know that you have the money to buy that and you want to buy that, but you're not allowed to have it. There wasn't a government restriction on it. Now, the same is not true today. Today, our military uses fully automatic weapons in many cases. In some cases, they use semi-automatic weapons, depending on what they're doing. Their sidearm is a semi-automatic pistol. You know, shit, the military even uses shotguns. And they will, they may still be using a bolt-action rifle for their snipers. I'm not sure. I need to look that up. The point is the military uses a wide array of weapons. But not all of those weapons are available to the public. Even the public that can afford them. And so then you have to ask yourself, well, why? Well, to answer that question, first you have to ask yourself, why was it so important that people have to be able to have the same weaponry as the military in the first place? And the answer is actually really simple. What had our founding fathers just done before writing the Constitution as it pertains to guns? Had they come back from a hunting trip? Had they recently defended their home against a burglar? Or had they fought against a tyrannical government and won? That's the reason for the Second Amendment. It's about you need to be able to defend yourself and your family. Yes, against regular threats, not, you know, the threat of somebody trying to hurt you or your family, somebody breaking into your home. That's normal. You know, I don't want to say that's normal. It shouldn't be normal. People should be better to each other. But the point of the matter is that's not what you would consider as extreme as what I'm going to say next. We should be prepared. I'm not saying we should want to. I'm not saying we should look forward to it, because there's nothing to look forward to here. There's not. We should be prepared to face our government if we have to. I know a lot of people in the armed forces, in law enforcement. The people I know understand that they swore their oath to the Constitution, not to the politician or who is directly overseeing them. These individuals would never obey an order that is tyrannical in nature. These soldiers that I know will never turn their guns on the American civilian. And as much as I'd like to say that all of our soldiers think that way, statistically it just can't be true. You're going to have people in there who have been so conditioned to just follow their orders that they're going to follow their orders. Maybe not even give a second thought as to whether or not it's wrong. You cannot trust. Well, you can trust if you want to, but it's not wise to trust your safety and your family's safety to someone else. Average police response time is 2 to 4 minutes. 2 minutes is a long time. 4 minutes is an eternity, especially when bad shit's happening. It is not the government's job to take care of you. Not financially, it's not the government's job to necessarily protect you from your fellow citizens. The government's job is to protect you from invading forces. That's essentially the government's job. If you boil it down to its simplest denominator, it's to ensure that nobody overtakes us. But if the government were to take away our weapons, they already have us at a severe disadvantage. Okay? Because it's not like a fully automatic weapon is impossible to get. It's very expensive, but there's a black market for everything. So it's not like it's impossible to get. So the other thing, the next point I would make with that is, so let's say somebody does get one. Somebody does get a fully automatic weapon, an M14, I believe is the one the military uses. Somebody's got a fully automatic weapon. Even if all you've got is a revolver, at least you've got something. But you are severely outgunned. Your chances of success are much lower. Because you do not have as much ammo as them. You cannot fire as quickly as them. So you're at a disadvantage. If our government ever turned on we the people, we're already at a disadvantage because we do not have the same level of weaponry that they have. Now that, by no stretch of the imagination, means that we could not prevail. It just means it would be that much harder for us. But imagine how much harder it would be, how near impossible it would be if they take away them all. And for those of you who are yelling at your screen right now saying they don't want to take all guns, yeah, they do. They may not be coming out and saying it, but if you pay attention to what they are saying and you know about guns, you understand that is what they're saying. That's what they're pushing towards. They started off talking about assault weapons, which assault weapon isn't a real thing. Assault is a verb. Okay? It's not a pronoun. Right? Nothing is an assault anything until it's used in an assault. Okay? This is a coffee mug. However, if I were to smash it on someone's head, then I guess you could call it an assault coffee mug. But until then, it's just a mug. So this idea of assault weapons, it's a buzzword. It's meant to inspire fear. Okay? The next point there is they go from saying assault weapons, and some of them will still say assault weapons, but they've kind of segued a little bit. Because they got too many people going, well, what's an assault weapon? They had too many people questioning them. So now they're talking about doing a ban for semi-automatic weapons. Yeah. And here's the problem. 95% of the guns on the market are semi-automatic. Now, your Glock, semi-automatic. Your Colt 1911, semi-automatic. Your hammerless revolver, semi-automatic. Your 22 Bearcat revolver, wait, no, that one's single action. My bad. Point is, all of these guns that are up until they pass this law, if they do, all of these are perfectly legal for citizens to have and everything else. They'll get if they get this law passed based on the semi-automatic weapons, and when they're talking about it, they're talking about the rifles, your AR-15s and the like. But what they say isn't as important as how they write that law. If they write the law as the public can no longer own semi-automatic weapons, they're gonna disarm. They in that moment will take millions of Americans and leave them with the choice of becoming a criminal or opening themselves up to be harmed. Government's tricky. Has been ever since they started letting lawyers in. No offense to any lawyers watching, but I don't trust you. You're a lawyer. That being said, the First and Second Amendment, these are the two most important amendments. The reason being, they're symbiotic. You can't just take away one. You can't just take away one because they protect each other. If you try to shut down free speech without disarming the populace, then you're probably going to have some people fighting back. If you try to disarm the populace without taking away free speech, you're going to have people protesting, speaking out, and calling attention to the fact that you are disarming them. They're symbiotic. They work together. You cannot take one without taking the other. And that is why I hold out a lot of hope that the government will not be successful in disarming the populace. However, as I said, government is sneaky. They've been doing this little by little over the years. And every now and again somebody slips. You know, they'll make comments like, when they give us the inch, we'll take the mile. Yeah, like, those of us paying attention already know that's what you're about. Okay? Nobody, the Bill of Rights is not the rights government gives you, as I said last time. It's the rights that you have that the government's not allowed to take away. But they are. If you're a gun owner and in your wallet you have a pistol permit, I commend you for following the law. I would also point out that that law is unconstitutional. And I can hear people now. But you can't just let anybody have guns. What about people? What about the felons and the violent people and this and that? Then you're getting into our criminal justice system, which also needs a huge amount of reform. And one day, I will probably do an episode just on that. But just because a guy gets in a fist fight, beats the shit out of somebody, doesn't mean he shouldn't be allowed to own a gun. Just because you own a gun doesn't mean that's going to be your first reaction. I've had plenty of tense situations where my gun's safely concealed on my hip. Okay? Guy's yelling and screaming, he's got a problem, and I just wait. Not to use my gun, because unless he produces a weapon, I have no reason to use my gun. There's a responsibility that comes with owning a gun. There's a responsibility there. Responsibility to be responsible. To not shed innocent blood. So but now you'll ask, well, what about somebody who commits violence with a gun? Okay. Somebody commits violence with a gun. My next statement will be controversial. If you murder, if we can prove that it was not in self-defense, if we can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that it was murder, we don't really have to worry about taking away your right to a gun, because in my estimation, you should be shuffled off this mortal coil. But we'll save the rest of that for my episode on prisons, why they are just black holes sucking money out of our system for no fucking reason. Pardon my French, I'm sorry. So, back to the Second Amendment. You see how everything's connected, and you can really end up going down a rabbit hole here. Back to the Second Amendment. In short, it is probably the second, if not the first. I like to lump the first and second together and say this is the most important part of the Constitution, because it is. These two are what allows us to be a free nation. You look at what's going on in Venezuela. People are trying to fight back. People are trying to better their lives. How much easier do you think it would be for them to do that if they hadn't had to give up their guns? We'll never know, but I'm sure we could imagine. One final note. If you go and you look at the statistics for gun violence in America, you're going to see a ton of deaths that are from gun violence every year. Now, I want to tell you a little something about those stats. Now, I'm going to tell you this, and you feel free to look it up and dig into it, because if you dig into it, you're going to find that I'm onto something here. You dig into those numbers, and the numbers are fluffed. And I say they're fluffed because of this. In their deaths from gun violence, they're including suicides. I'm pretty sure suicide doesn't fall under violence because it's not being perpetrated on another person. It's a person doing it to themselves. that I don't believe should be classified as violence. Suicide is obviously not a good subject. It's not a good thing, but at the same time, it's also not something that you can stop an adult from doing, really, if they want to. Just like anything else, if a person wants to do something, they will find a way. But the point is they're using the numbers from suicide to help bolster the numbers for the gun violence, because it helps them scare people into giving up their rights. Just like they do something similar for the school shootings. They had there was, again, there's been situation out west. There was an incident of gang violence in the parking lot of a school at 2:00 in the morning when nobody was there from the school. Just these gang members who met in the parking lot to have their little shootout. Okay? That got listed as a school shooting. While technically it was a shooting that happened at a school, it's misleading. That one's tough because it's technically it's honest, but it's also dishonest, because nobody from the school, no kids were in any danger on that one. It was just the fucking knuckleheads. Again, sorry, pardon my French. Just the knuckleheads over there trying to blow each other's brains out. It's numbers that you're going to see on the news deserve further scrutiny. Because you have to remember, news stations, I don't care what news station it is, news stations have an agenda. Whether that agenda be, pro the current administration or against the current administration, doesn't matter. They've got an agenda. And if they've got an agenda, they're more likely to lie to you. They're going to lie to you to serve their agenda. If some part of the truth or the facts doesn't line up with their agenda, they're just gonna omit it. Or maybe if they can find a way to twist it, they'll do that. And again, this is all the news stations. This is all of the mainstream news stations. I'm not just talking about CNN or MSNBC. I'll throw Fox in there too. I don't trust them any more than I trust CNN. It's all owned by big business, and big business has a stake in what happens. And it's not the same stake that we the people have. If they can convince the populace to think the way they want them to think, then they can achieve their goal. I don't, personally, you can hold any beliefs you want. I'm cool. We have talk. We don't have to agree on anything. We don't. I have several people who I'm very, very, very friendly with who we don't agree. We agree on some things. We don't agree on anything else. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And we have civil conversations about it all. Okay? I work with a guy who describes himself as a left-wing anarchist. I asked him how that works, since left-wing generally wants bigger government with more power, but an anarchist generally wants no government. So I don't understand how that one works. And admittedly, he wasn't really able to explain it to me in a way that made sense, but it's fine. This is how he wants to classify himself. I mean, okay, it doesn't make sense to me, but I'm not going to disrespect him. I'm not going to be mean to him. No, we have a discussion. He and I don't agree on anything, really. Maybe once in 1 out of 10 subjects we can agree on. He's still my friend. We still get along. We look at the world differently. We come from different backgrounds, different life experiences. We look at things differently. And the idea of what's important to us is different. And that's the thing. Like, I can tell you that the First and Second Amendment are the most important amendments. And me sitting back looking at things, looking at the history of the world, looking at, from a place of as little emotion as possible and as much logic as I can muster. Okay, this is what it looks like to me. Now, not everybody does that. Some people are, far more emotional in their thoughts and views. Some people are even less emotional in their thoughts and views, and it affects things. And here's the thing. I try very hard not to take the line of telling somebody you're wrong, even if I think they are, because I don't want to come off as appearing as if I am attacking them, because that's not going to get us anywhere. It needs to be a discussion. When I discuss these things with people, I try to talk to them much in the same manner as I'm talking to you now, and it's explaining, they'll say this, well, the gun show loophole. There's no such thing as a gun show loophole. You still, in the majority of states, in all of the states where you have to have a permit and register your firearms, every state that has that also has the rule that if you're going to buy a gun, it has to go through a FFL. Okay, it has to go through somebody who's federally designated to be able to sell firearms. Okay, so yeah, as ridiculous as I personally think that is, if your grandpa wants to give you a gun, he's got to go through an FFL to do it. I think it's a little ridiculous, but it still goes back to this point that the gun show loophole doesn't exist. If you buy or win a gun at a gun show, they're going to ask you what FFL, I think I'm getting those letters right, what dealer, what gun dealer you want it sent to so that you can get it. You don't walk into a gun show and buy a AK-47 and walk out with it. That's not how it works. Anywhere. It's not how it works. There was another thing. There was a young lady that I know who said, this touches on another issue that we're not going to talk about today, which would be abortion, but she made a comment about how one day, she made a snide comment to me. She's like, one day I hope women have the same rights as guns. I laughed at her. I said, so you think that a man should need a license to have a woman? You think that a woman should only be able to be obtained through a license? You think that women should not be allowed in government buildings? You think that women should not be allowed on school property? You think that women should not be allowed in the polling place? You think that women must be locked up and secured when not in use? You think that a man should be able to have multiple women? And she just kind of stops and looks at me. And the reason is because she didn't know anything about guns or the laws surrounding them. There's a lot of ignorance in the world about a lot of things, but there is a lot of ignorance when it comes to guns among people who are not interested in them or involved in them or afraid of them or whatever or whatever else. But the you can't change the facts, and the facts is that all the laws that we have on the books, okay, they affect the law-abiding citizen. If you pass another law, it's going to affect the law-abiding citizen. it's not going to affect the criminal. It's simply not. You pass a law saying that firearms need to be turned in. You know what? Law-abiding Americans will do it. You know who's not going to do it? The Bloods, the Crips, Latin Kings, MS-13, Hells Angels, Outlaws, Pagans. Do I need to keep going? Triad, Yakuza. The criminals aren't gonna turn in their guns. They're not gonna do it. Disarming the populace only makes the populace more at risk. It is what it is. Those are the facts. And as a very wise man once said, facts don't care about your feelings. That being said, even though I don't think you actually have a chance in hell, Bobby, in closing, I say this straight to you, Mr. Bobby Frank. If you're going to come take them, come personally. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Ken Carnage. This has been Capital Carnage. Capital Carnage. Yeah, excuse me. And until next time, see Vis Batchum.